What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. Today, I have Garrett Burnett, and he is the head of global events at Silicon Labs. Garrett, welcome. Thanks for being here, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So what we're going to talk today, and again, I always love talking to head of global events because you guys have such cool stuff going on, right? You have such a mix of like host events. Sometimes there's like executive events, there's sales events, summits, there's trade shows. There's such an array that goes under your umbrella. So I really love to kind of pick and talk, have those conversations about where you're having success, where you're struggling, things you've done that have worked, and just the general landscape of events. So let's start with, what I think is interesting about the program that you manage is the fact that you activate around a big conference every year, and you also host a user conference, one that you're turning into a roadshow. So it seems like it's a very highly niche audience. Can you tell me about like your audience and kind of like why things are broken out this way for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're unique in the semiconductor industry because we tend to specialize on a very niche set of technologies. In my case, at Silicon Labs, our audience is a very specific type of developer. They're developing devices specifically around wireless IoT devices. And so that is a very kind of niche subset of developer that we've kind of crafted personas around and really have a good understanding of how they consume information, where they like to go, how they learn. And that's been really important in how we've built out the events portfolio.
It's awesome. So when you first came to Silicon Labs, right? How much of that like audience piece was really dialed in this events program? And did you just kind of hop in and say, okay, I'm going to take over, improve things? Or was it more so like uncovering things about the audience and kind of transitioning and changing things? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think we've been fortunate. Silicon Labs has been around for several decades. And so being very kind of foundational in the semiconductor industry, I think they already had a really good idea of their audience. And so I think the big change over the last several years has been kind of coming out of COVID and the way that people are digesting information and learning about new technologies and kind of staying on the edge of the latest and greatest for how they're developing products and different protocols and standards and technologies that are changing rapidly every day. I think that was kind of what changed, and looking at where are our customers spending their time, where are they finding the information, how are they already kind of organically connecting with each other, what's working, and kind of filling in some gaps there on even new technologies over the last 5 years that have exploded, like podcasts and, just different modes of how people are getting their information, and making sure that we've got solutions in place to make sure we're there where they're spending their time.
That's great stuff. Yeah, I think like just hearing what you're saying, like some of the things I like about it is one of the things I've talked with a lot of event marketers about is like how much of a Swiss Army knife you have to be, especially if you're really good. Right. So a lot of people in your shoes ahead of global events have obviously built their career up. So they are very good. So essentially, it's not just being an event person anymore. It's being a marketer, it's being an executive, a business person, and all the things you're talking about with the customer, who they are, meeting them where they are. Because I asked you, were there changes to the program? Were there changes to you coming in, identifying audience? And you're like, well, no, but there's changes in the world. There's changes the way people are communicating, right? I love what you said about where they spend their time. So like, is that something that you're dissecting and talking about at your company? Like, okay, like where are our customers? How do they want to be met? Where do they want to be met? Because I love that stuff. I'm so interested in like meeting, I always use the term meeting people where they are and like in the right method and way. So it's authentic. So is there anything you've uncovered or done recently, or you guys have made a change to that, you feel like has kind of hit that nail on the head?
Yeah, I think, I'm a firm believer that everything is an event, right? And to your point of event professionals being kind of a Swiss Army knife of expertise and skills, and more importantly, the ability to bring people together, whether that's at an actual event, an activation, or internally within your own company to get the right people to the table to be able to really evaluate, strategize, and accomplish the goals that you're setting out for yourselves. And I think what's really evolving is people want to get out, people want to meet, people want to be in person, and there is that little sense of magic that just can't be replaced by, a virtual experience anymore. And so we're really looking closely at the data behind what's working in the virtual space. Obviously, the global access is irreplaceable from a virtual perspective. People can find you and take part in that very easily. But then there is that, again, magic element of bringing people together, getting them out of their own office space, right? Meeting in whether that's a trade show or a conference, right? Like getting them out of the office so that you're removing a lot of those blinds and kind of tunnel vision that can happen, right? When you know how many emails are piling up in your inbox and the other meetings that you
Yeah.
have, the random drive-bys, right, of coworkers that you have to address. So I think that's been key in our strategy and just making sure that we're, again, meeting those folks where they are, but also creating a really cool environment for them to be able to really be engaged.
I actually saw something the other day, reminds me of what you just said to a degree. Is it was for some event, I forget which one. I'd love to shout them out, but they did something where during one of the sessions, it was a keynote or information they were giving or a workshop, and they asked a question as like a poll that said, is this something you would have preferred to digest on YouTube or on a webinar on home? And I was like, what a great question, because to what you're saying is like, people do want to get out. They do want to have that sense of belonging. They want to be brought together. They can also do way more from home than they ever could. So part of an events person job is to deliver that experience and that belonging and that bringing together. And I think a lot of people are still struggling with not changing their events, changing their approach, and changing kind of like the way they bring people together.
That's right. I completely agree.
Let's talk about, speaking of bringing people together, you have an awesome user conference. Tell us about that conference and like host event that you have. I mean, give me some details, give me the overview. Let's start there.
Yeah, so the conference is called Works With, and it kind of the genesis, it was born fully as a virtual event right in the middle of the pandemic. And as fun and exciting as that time was, and the main objective was really, it's an interesting name and kind of outside of the industry, it's like, what does that even mean? But the spirit of the event is less about who we are as a company and more about who we work with to enable our customers
I
to
love
be
that.
right. And so nobody wants a sales pitch. And that's kind of, I'm a firm believer in building advocacy over being a salesperson or really providing your own value. Like it's one thing when you communicate that, but it's a much more powerful thing when either customers or the people that you work with are kind of telling your story on your behalf. So the whole conference is really showcasing the latest innovations around the technologies, the integrations and partners that we work with to enable our customers to be really successful and scale accordingly.
That's awesome. So, I mean, I just want to tell for everybody listening, like take notes on what Garrett just said, like that running a host event, the amount of events that I was just having this conversation with my director of account management admin. And essentially I was saying how many events I've been to that are supposed to be geared towards me as an attendee. And they are absolutely not. Right. I could just tell it's just people trying to put something together that's essentially they think this is a cool idea. Like what you just said is like our whole event is based on like this value for the attendee or what they would want. It's all about them. Even the name, you don't even name it about you. You name it about them. I think the second thing that you said that's interesting is that no one wants a sales pitch. And I think this is something that is a huge shift in events, which is like, look, we understand that if you're hosting an event in general, to a degree, it is a sales pitch. If you are not a customer in some form, everybody knows if you're a decent ICP or target, whatever you want to call it. So you don't need to pitch. You just need to deliver a very good experience and connect with them. So I love that you said that. It feels to me like you guys have that, like, hit the nail on the head with it. Like, how to operate that event in that sense.
That's right. And I think we've gotten a lot of good feedback. I think kind of we're doing some new things this year, which again, we're kind of always experimenting to see how we can continue to push the envelope and continue that innovation. I think this is the first year we're actually going to be doing some in-person components. We're really excited about that and kind of taking it on the road, like you mentioned. So lots of
So
things
that's
ahead.
interesting. Tell me about the going from virtual to in person to as well as on the road, like the kind of the progression there, the thought process behind it, the reasoning behind it, all that.
I think, it's really important. We first and foremost started with the data. And I think that's something that, our customers are not all in one city. No company has an individual city localized, set of customers, right? We have to think really globally. And so kind of historically, the virtual event has really been able to address that. And we've got a lot of good data on where our attendees are coming from. And so we kind of pivoted that. We could tell that there was an appetite to, again, get out of the house, get in person, community build, all of that. And especially from a brand perspective, kind of building the exposure around who we are as a company, and again, not just what we're offering, but also the amazing things that we're doing with our partners in ecosystem build out. So we decided for this first year that we're going to do the best that we can to kind of meet our customers again where they are, and that means in this example like their specific geographies. And so we chose 4 cities around the world where we feel like we've got a good density of customer populations. We're trying to build this as something that's very convenient but really valuable, and it's again compelling enough for them to kind of take a day to come learn, come network, come build their skill sets and actually have some hands-on experiences.
That's great. What are you learning as you do this? What are you learning about building an in-person, we'll call it on the road host event?
Yeah, I think, there's no cookie cutter template for any event, right? That's something, there is nothing harder than building something from the ground up, whether you're creating a new product, inventing something, or putting on an event for the first time, right? So I'm having to look at every individual event as just that, its own kind of silo of who are the audience, what do they really care about? We're customizing the content per location. So really thinking about the industry segment representations, thinking about the customer base that we know that we've got in those geographies, and working really closely with our field teams to understand like what are the conversations you're having? What is the most value? How can we enable you the best that we can, and kind of building out each individual event with its own kind of customized experience.
Tell me a little bit about the collaboration you're saying, like with field teams and people in those areas, right? I talk a lot about just the event marketer themselves, how they do have to be able to work laterally as well as vertically so well, right? You got to be able to kind of get key stakeholders, executives to buy into what you're doing. You got to be able to communicate with them. But then you also have, like, when you're running these events, I mean, you have to be able to work with marketing, because events are not marketing, but they kind of are marketing, right? But they're their own thing. So you got to work in marketing. You got to work with sales or go to market, or, it depends on the way the company is. So tell me a little bit about that collaboration and working with them to kind of execute this.
Absolutely. And I think across the board, no matter what industry you are in, as an event professional, this is one of those kind of superpower things
Yep.
that you have to possess to be successful. And it's also one of my favorite parts of my job. It's very rare that, a role in a company, especially as an individual marketer, you have exposure to literally every facet of the business, right? I have to not be fluent, but be dangerous enough to meet, the level of technology, vocabulary, the kind of building blocks and connection pieces of knowing who to invite to a meeting, given specific subject matter, if it's
Yeah.
content or the technology we're showcasing. It's not just, hey, does this sound good for the agenda build? It's like, no, but like, how are we actually going to do that? Can we commit to bringing that to life in a scalable way, right? There's questions that as event professionals, we have to know how to ask and make sure that it's, meeting everyone kind of where they are in the company as well.
It truly is. I mean, you have to be able to work with the people around you and collaborate, because everybody is involved to a degree. So you kind of become a little bit of a ringleader, right? Like, you kind of become the person that's kind of running the circus. I hate saying that, but that's really, it's amazing. Like, you have to be able to understand how to sell things to people, how to collaborate with them. And by sell, I mean on an idea or something that maybe is correct in terms of an event when people are questioning things. For you, how did you develop that skill set? Do you think you're good at it? Is it something you work on? Do you have any like tricks of the trade for people that are maybe aspiring to be a head of global events like yourself?
Absolutely. For me, it's taken 14 years to get to where I am. I will never say like I'm really great at that, right? I think as events people, we have to approach everything from a spirit of just an eagerness and curiosity to learn. And I think that's been one of my tricks that has paid several dividends in just the way and, especially if you're new at a company or don't maybe have all the exact relationships, right? Some of the hardest questions you'll ask yourself, who do I even go to for this, right? Who should I talk to? Who does have the answer or the ability to make this decision, right? So I think that has been something that, and again, another unique superpower of events professionals, right? Like we can kind of do our job in any industry. And that's something that I'm learning is kind of rare, especially in my segment of industry. A lot of people have to have, this specific skill and experience to function in this environment. But working at different companies from large enterprise software companies to hardware and other types of engineering companies and now kind of in the semiconductor space, I think it's just again that curiosity and eagerness to learn and start with questions and kind of ask why to build your own kind of knowledge base, and then that kind of credibility comes with that.
I think being curious and being eager to learn is a communication skill that some people overlook, in the sense that when you're going more curious, more eager, asking questions versus delivering statements, you typically gain more. And then the second superpower, I think, is if you're able to listen. If you can actually listen to what someone is saying inside of that conversation, you're then it becomes so much more easy to navigate your situations and to talk to people and not necessarily get what you want, but be able to get the best outcome from a scenario when you're having to work laterally or with multiple departments. So I like that you said that. On that topic, I do like asking this. I think it's a good time to ask this. What would you recommend to somebody? You catch somebody in their mid late 20s, or even if they're older too, right? And they're working as more of an event manager at a corporate company, right? More executing, and they have, aspirations to become a head of global events, right? What kind of advice would you give somebody like that in terms of ways of mindset, thinking, skills to obtain, any bits that you'd give them?
Yeah, I think for me, kind of looking back, even if I can talk to myself 10 years ago, like that kind of spirit, I think I would always just say, it's the relationships, right? The relationships and building kind of your core network of people, both inside and outside your company, right? As far as, getting to a leadership role, that takes a lot of training, conversations, being able to really check all the boxes across not just the feet on the street production execution side of it, but also being able to up level the conversation to all the way up to the executives to help define the strategies, define the goals, define the overall financial structure, right? Somebody who's in kind of this leadership type of role has to be able to speak at every stage of that process. And I think a lot of younger planners or folks who are earlier in their careers do get buried, right, with just the sheer volume of tasks that have to be done. And it's not easy, but really starting to be able to prioritize how can you always be up leveling that conversation and showcasing it's not just I'm executing on what I'm being told to do, but I'm coming to the table with not just ideas, but solutions that are really going to drive value for the business.
Yeah, we've gotten that question a lot just from people that listen to the podcast or attend the live show. I've never been a head of global events, right? So it's tough for me to answer. So I typically answer it from like my seat of being a CEO and running a company. And I don't want to call it a blanket answer, but I find it constantly mirrors up with what people like yourself say. Is I'm always like, be curious. And I think if you're looking to advance, it is not saying go the extra mile, because I think some people just constantly do, or at least they always feel like they are, right? Everyone tells themselves that story. I think it's constantly trying to understand the bigger picture. And that's kind of a bit of what you were getting at, which is like, yes, you have these tasks and yes, you are executing and this work has to be done. But like, you got to think outside of what's going on around you to a degree. What is the bigger picture of what's happening? I think that's excellent advice for people, because sometimes people don't understand the business case of what's going on or how all the dots get connected. And when you start to figure those things out, you can really work a lot smarter, faster, and just become better at what you do.
Absolutely. And I think, important to say that events are not cheap, right? And in any organization, marketers can attest to this, right? Like being able to sell the value and the impact on what you're doing is absolutely critical. and being able to, even at the executive level, right? Like, why are we doing this? What are we really trying to accomplish? I'm maybe a little more on the controversial side of my profession because I'm the first person to say this doesn't have to be an event. We probably shouldn't do it because there's a lot more effective ways if we're just trying to build a leads list or
Yep.
drive awareness or there are other ways to accomplish those things at a much more scalable rate to save the financial burden on the company. But there are definitely times where it is one of the most valuable investments that you can make.
It's funny. Mark Brewster, I had him on as a guest. He's the founder and CEO of a company called Explory. And him and I had a really great conversation, but he said something, and I think he just framed it up. It's like, it's something I know, but the way he framed it, you ever have someone do that for you? You're like, oh, wow. And he's like, the event program at a company is essentially one of the most expensive. It has one of the largest carbon footprints at a company, and it's the least measured. He said, so you have to be really good at selling your case. This is what you're saying. You have to be good at being a way to, sort of navigate those conversations and be pick and choose about where you go, why you go, and how you go. So do you have any advice for, people on how to do that, on whether it's with key stakeholders or whether it's with your peers? Is there any kind of methods you've used that have worked?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I always say like start with the goals, right? And that's like I kick off every event that I do kind of starting with that in mind, like getting alignment, figuring out who those key stakeholders are, getting them around a table to really dive into what is it that we're really trying to accomplish. Like by the end of this meeting, we need to be locked in and ready to go consistently, right, throughout the rest of this planning process, because everything that we're going to do is around starting with being able to accomplish what we're doing today. And I think that is so crucial. And again, like everything is an event, right? Whether you're planning, your annual portfolio of what you want to do, or even in sales, customer meetings, experiences, right? Like everything has kind of that event spirit. And I think starting that way and saying, hey, like, what do we really want to accomplish? And then going with, okay, what's the how? Like, how do we go out there? How do we bring this to life? Where are we going to do it and make it, align with everything that we're trying to accomplish? And again, like marketing wise, like event planners have to be fully open to kind of having every aspect of marketing, even within their event portfolio, right? It's building websites, it's registration processes, it's capturing data, it's the content development overall, the budget management and project management, stakeholder buy-in, all of it, right? It's everything that broader marketing teams do, just at the smaller scale of the event focus.
The Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
Like his having that ability. You know what, when you're talking about goals, right, and things of that nature, one of the things that I have found over the years, and when we work with our customers, it is heavily into their trade shows and then heavily into the build end of things with their host events, right? And I've been in these conversations where if I'm talking to people and they're like, oh, we should do this and we should do this and we should do this. And I'm always like, well, does that align with the goals? Because like these ideas are awesome, and I would love to sit here and talk all these crazy ideas, but you're creating this foundation with what you're saying as like, once you have these goals and you know what the purpose of this whole thing is, it really gives you a foundation to work from, a North Star, if you would, to make decisions, to guide what you're doing, and to help keep you on track, which I really like as advice for people. Because I think as simple as it could be sometimes, you'd be surprised how many people just have an idea for an event or have an idea to exhibit at a third party conference and just go just to go. They don't really have that stuff lined up. And then even worse, they don't make decisions based along the way, based on a goal or an objective.
I totally agree.
Let's go back to your user conference. Sorry, I kind of wandered off. I was asking you so that stuff, but let's go back to your user conference. I wrote here, it's funny that we ended up landing on goals and objectives, right? Because where I note is I wanted to ask you, and you don't have to give us all of them. I know some of it, it's proprietary and things like that. But what are some of your goals and objectives and kind of like North Star aim points for for your host event that your road host event? I keep trying to get those two together, but sorry.
Yeah, it is kind of a, because of the scale, right? It's not like your Super Bowl with, hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
people. It's more of like
Yep.
smaller activations along the way.
I
So
love it, by the way.
bit of a
I
roadshow
think it's
hybrid,
great.
right?
Love
Yeah.
it.
I think for us, it's really taking a look at the audience makeup of who you want in each of these locations and making sure that, to your point, the goals are aligned. Like each of the four locations that we have chosen have a completely different audience breakup. And so therefore, the types of content, the types of sessions, what we're building out the experience around is totally different. One of them is really more of a thought leadership type of
Okay.
segment. That's really more of a kind of a high level executive type of audience, right? So everything that we're doing at the other events is not going to fit that event, right? So again, kind of curating the experience, making sure that you're really building out everything, right?
Yeah.
Communications, emails, invitations, website, like the whole thing has to be kind of geared towards who is the audience, who am I trying to get in front of, and more importantly, get to attend the event, right?
Yeah.
And then some of the others are more for training types of goals and kind of building out awareness and kind of more of a brand play, right? We're trying to really position ourselves as, the number one wireless IoT company in the industry. And
Mhm.
we need to do that by bringing our subject matter experts, our executive teams, all of the latest and greatest technologies that we're going to be announcing. That's kind of more important for some of the other events, whereas kind of that thought leadership play is more about building customer advocacy and thought
Yeah.
leadership way.
I'm glad you said that because, sometimes when people get stuck into goals and alignments and audiences, they forget that they may have multiple or they may have different types or they may have different, right? And I think it's so important when you're going, like we talk about this with our clients all the time, when they're doing 5, 6, 7, 8 trade shows, like everyone is not the same. You know what I mean? Like at one, you may be seeing a lot of, like I was using an example. We have a client that basically their decision maker is the CTO, but the person that they work and they bid and they go through process with is like a senior engineer type. And we're always talking about like, okay, well, when you're with the senior engineers, like they're very different people than the CTO. And so those tracks are different, those engagements are different, those goals, those conversations are different. So I like that you said that and that you do have these different geographies essentially as you set stuff up. So like your goals and the way you approach each four of these roadshows is going to be different.
Yeah. And I think it's important to also consider like we're building out the flow of the timeline of the events in a way that, kicking off with more of that executive type of customer and that engagement will inevitably build awareness and kind of recommendations and referrals for the
Yep.
subsequent events, right? And while those attendees are probably not the folks who want to attend those more regional, localized events, the people on their team are absolutely who we're looking for. And so kind of again, being thoughtful and strategic about how you're kind of building in your own promotional efforts and kind of rippling effect for the communications of the other types of events that you're doing after the one that you're already having.
Literally yesterday, I did a live podcast, live show, and I did it. I was kind of working through something that I've been kind of connecting the dots on, did a live show and took some questions. But what I was talking about is what I call pipeline impact. And what I was trying to describe to people is similarly what you were just saying, which is like people get very obsessed with leads. They're like, oh, we need leads. Oh, we need leads. Well, it's like, okay, well, when you look at your event program, you create impact to your pipeline in a lot of different ways. And you need to know the how. You need to know what's going on, meaning like, are you have one piece of this that's creating referrals and it's 2, 3 pegs down. So like, you're not just going to generate a lead. So you have to find a different way to track that. You have to understand like, is it going to raise average sale? Is it going to create deal cycle acceleration? Is it going to just be a net new lead and they're going to buy from you in 6 months? Like you got to understand it to then be able to draw the line back to how does this affect our pipeline? So that's just another excellent point. And I love hearing you saying it because it's kind of something that I'm working through to help our customers with and talk about. So it was really nice to hear.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, especially depending on the types of industry that you're in. Obviously, if you're
Mm-hmm.
selling widgets or softwares
Yep.
or whatever it is, like really aligning again, like I am best friends with our sales organization. I love them so much, but
Yeah.
like we have a very unique long sales cycle, right? And so whereas a more traditional goal and objective, especially for a third party type of sponsored event like a trade show, it's obviously like, hey, we need deals, we need,
Yep.
it's tied to revenue. That's not always the case, and it shouldn't always be the case, right? And
Agreed.
so again, really being clear on what does a win look like, and
Mm-hmm.
is this, getting us to the next step? Like sometimes that is just as important as a signature on the bottom of a contract.
So that's like the greatest segue ever. And you didn't even know that you're supposed to segue. So that's awesome. We're going to segue to talk about trade shows. But what I love about what you're saying is so true in that, like, there's this whole ROI conversation and this pressure being put on event people. And I think it's overwhelming, right? It's overwhelming. And where people are missing, like, oh my God, I got to, okay, ROI, what, oh, what deals? Oh my God, well, there wasn't a lot of new deals. And it's like, well, you need to understand, what is that show producing you? It may not be net new deals, but what is it producing? Are there distribution channels? Are there customers that are there? Is there, like, what is happening at that show? And understanding that is really vital to being able to create your ROI. I mean, to being able to put a report together that's like, hey, this is what's going on at these events. And this is, as I'm calling it, pipeline impact. Like, this is the impact it's having, because that's what everybody wants, right? That's eventually going for, but how you get there, it's different. So in April,
Yeah.
Nuremberg, Germany, nailed it.
You're
Never
in.
been.
Yeah.
Never been. Hopefully, I go soon. Embedded World 2024, big trade show for you guys, right? So,
Yeah.
third party conference, your exhibitor. I don't know if you sponsor, right? But it's a big thing for you. So, talk to me. Tell me your, you know, approach when you go to such a important part of your portfolio of events. Tell me your approach.
Absolutely. So, we've done this show for nearly a decade at this point. It is it's the world's largest embedded computing conference. I know, like, when I tell my friends that, they're like, excuse me. And, but it is an incredibly important show. And what makes it stand out truly is how technical the attendees are. And I think that's really, it's an interesting, it's kind of the first thing on my strategy bucket of like, okay, this is not the chance for us to like create like all of this fluffy content and, marketing materials that look amazing. What they really care about is the nuts and bolts of what's new, what is the latest innovation, how are you going to make my job as a developer easier? And we're there every year, so you've got to have something that they didn't see last year, right? Like that's the
Yep.
expectation. And beyond that, it's a really great chance for us to engage with our customers face to face. So it's kind of a two-prong approach. We've got the meetings piece, and we love catching up with all of our customers at that show every year. Our executives love that show, right? They're attending in person, so it's a great chance for them to engage with our customers face to face as well. But there's also the technical side of it, right? So we had, I think, 10 subject matter experts that spoke as a part of the technical sessions and training. We had about 10 to 12 demos technically that really showcased the latest and greatest on our technology advancements. And then we had a huge contingency of the company that actually went. So whether you're there to learn, whether you're there to meet with customers, partners, right? Just kind of seeing what everybody else in the embedded community is up to. It's always a great event for us.
I like that you said that the attendees are technical, right? So something that, like, we talk about here all the time is we have a bit of a framework when we're working with somebody going to a trade show. First thing we talk about is the why. The next thing we talk about is the customer, prospect, audience, right? The third is we talk about the brand. The fourth is we end up rolling into goals, objectives. And then the fifth is kind of those four, like the pillar foundation to then create engagement, right? So I see so many people going to trade shows, having a booth designed for them, creating a strategy and approach and everything. And they've never really, really considered that, like, you are dead set on that these people are technical. They're not looking for some magical experience. They're just not. It doesn't even like resonate with them to a degree. They're technical. They want the information. They want to talk to experts. So is that something you landed on by yourself? Is that something that your company just knew? Is it through experience being there? And then second part to that question is, how does the design process of your trade show booth, the engagements and the activations that you plan fold into them being a technical audience?
Yeah, I think, for us, it's been the years of experience in kind of consistently being present at that show that's really helped us hone in where we've landed today. I think for a lot of event people and companies, my biggest piece of advice here is like, don't reinvent the wheel if you don't need to, right? And to your point of like understanding that this audience specifically is so technical, they are not going to remember what your booth look like. They're not as in the weeds of like, oh, this wall graphic, like where should the logo? Is it the lower right-hand corner or left side, right? And they're spending so much money completely revamping their booth every year, where my whole thought on that process is like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Like, yes, update, make sure everything is showcasing your latest and greatest. Maybe it's a tagline, maybe it's a few minor, updates to the products you're showcasing. But we've had the same booth layout wise for probably 4 or 5 years now. And that has been a huge
Works.
cost savings. Yes. And right. And so then that really allows us and sets the expectation, I think, for the attendees of like, they know where to go, they know where to find us, they know who they need to go talk to from the previous year. If that's the type of, our developers have a very specific set of technology that they develop for. And so they know what they're looking for, the protocols that they're working with. And so that's been a really kind of impactful thing in a way, again, as we're trying to be as financially conscious for the business as possible, that we've been able to generate a lot of savings.
How do you, from a show like that, like what kind of measurement do you do? Do you have like, I like to think of like leading and lagging kind of numbers, right? From things like that. So what do you have? Anything that's important to you that kind of stands out?
Yeah, I think for me, it's, obviously we're tracking, the meetings, the customers who we, had interactions with. We also are tracking the conversations from the demonstrations that we're offering, right? So we're scanning those leads. I think important there is that it's not a quantity game. It's much more important for those conversations that we're coming back and saying, hey, we talked to this many people. Like, I'm less concerned that it's a huge number and more concerned that we've taken the detailed information on how should we be following up with those people. And I think, again, as events pros, we're constantly having to work with other teams and making sure that we've got the right tools in place, the right measurements in place, the right metrics, and to be able to report out on that is really important. But thankfully, we've got a really good technology team that is really great on being able to make sure we're tracking everything really effectively.
How does the day to day at a large conference like that for you? Is there a certain approach with the team? Because, you have thought leaders coming in, you probably have sales coming in, you have team members, I mean, you have all these people, from Silicon Labs coming in. And now, how do you keep everybody on the same page for 3, 4 days and focused?
It's a great question. We sent, I think, close to 60 people this year.
Yeah, it's a lot of people.
And when you think about it, it's a lot of, and I think as event people, we end up kind of being the experts for all of the information, right? Whether
You're
from
it. That's
travel logistics to weather to I forgot my,
the minute they get off the plane, you're it.
yeah, and that's happened. Like, we joke about it now, but someone my first year called and was like, "I've flown to Germany. Where do I go now?" But again, Swiss Army knife. Like, you've got to be ready to do that. But I think to give yourself a little peace of mind, I think that's really where the pre-work is important, and specifically around the communications. And I build out very robust, like, know before you go event guides, everyone, like, technology trainings on how all of our systems are set up for scheduling meetings with the customers, right? And so over the last several years, the team and I are in lockstep. Like, there are very clear agendas. We have a whole schedule for the demo team. People know where they need to be when. Last year we actually had the keynote at the entire event, which was really great and built a lot of buzz around for us. But everyone needs a clear role, and I think the work that you do ahead of time to set those expectations, make sure the team knows exactly where they need to be when. And again, what makes that really easy is the right tools and technology to help you set yourself up for success. But as long as you've done the legwork, everyone feels like they know where they are, it generally results in a pretty easy flow event.
How frustrated you get when somebody asks you something that you're like, that was in the know before you go. It's in there. I gave it to you.
It is inevitable. At this point, I've been in this job for a long,
Yeah.
long time. I know what's coming. I think the funny ones from this year. Somebody asked me if I had any like Tylenol PM, right? Because jet lag is a real thing.
Yep.
Somebody inevitably forgot charging converter for European
Yep.
plugs, that kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? Easy to forget, but you just have to laugh it off at some point.
We did. We're at an event and we were joking around. We were doing like we're creating some content with a lot of event marketers and people that we know and clients and stuff. Like, the whole thing on TikTok where it's like, I'm this, of course, right? Whatever it is. So we are doing, I'm an event marketer, of course. And one of the women was like, I'm an event marketer. Of course you didn't read the know before you go. Or of course you didn't read my email with every bit of information ever possible for this event. And now you're texting me about it. I always think that's funny because every single person says the same thing.
Absolutely. I know. I know I'm in good company on this podcast.
Yes. So wrap up here. You had mentioned when we first talked that events is the discipline that goes across all disciplines, right? What exactly did you mean by that? I feel like we touched on it a little bit, but I'm just curious when you said that specifically, exactly what you meant.
Yeah, I think it has a couple of different layers, right? I think there's internally, you have to have great networking relationships with everybody, right? It's
Yeah.
sales, it's engineering, it's product, it's the executive team. And there's just so many different layers to that that are important. You have to be able, even down to like the finance team and who's paying the bills and the invoices, right? Like you've got to know who is in every single stage of how
Yeah.
your event is progressing. I think the other layer to that is just industry, right? Like we are masters, we are ninjas in project management across the board. And so give me 1 second. I'm going to pause real quick. And the project management piece, right? So it's again, doesn't matter necessarily on what type of company that you're in, right? And I've predominantly been in kind of the B2B tech sector for the majority of my career. But I think that's what's so cool about events. Like I was talking to a fellow planner in Germany where the venue where Embedded World is hosted. And like the next week, one of the largest events they do every year is like an antique toy show. And it's just like I never even knew that existed, right? But it's the same skill sets, the same kind of expertise levels that apply across the board.
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to what we talked about earlier about being an events person. As you get to certain levels and getting better at what you do, you truly do become a Swiss Army knife. Like, yes, you're in events and you have to master that planning and those coordination and those logistics and being able to run that event, but you eventually need to understand the whole marketing element. You eventually need to understand that there is a huge financial implication to events. And yeah, you don't have to be the CFO, but you have to have a gauge on that you're deploying what I think event budgets float around 20% of total marketing, and a lot of times they're higher. A lot of times they're 40%, so you have to be able to know that. And then you got to be able to collaborate and work with everybody because everybody's needed for events. So it really is one of the main features and skills when talking to really good directors of events, head of global events, essentially. I wouldn't say that they have mastered, but something that they are very present of mind about that they have to do.
Absolutely. And I think it's easy as an events person to have a little bit of an imposter syndrome, right? Especially at these companies and my companies specifically, I work with a ton of very smart people. Our entire sales force almost is made up of professional engineers.
Mm.
So there's a little bit of an intimidation factor, I think, especially for newer planners to feel like they belong and especially in an industry where you may not, our predominantly everybody at our company has a technical background. I don't, right? So there's a lot of kind of learning. And again, that curiosity we talked about, the willingness to learn, I think carries you a lot of weight and making sure that you're kind of building that credibility piece, but also really understanding the value that you do bring to the table. And I think for a lot of people, when you're not a developer or an executive or whatnot, like you just have to realize like you're looking at this thing from a completely different angle, which is equally important. And being able to actually bring something to life from scratch is its own skill set and value as well. So I think that's important to mention.
It's a great point. One of the things I talk to a lot of the people at my company about is because, I mean, we have so many departments with what we do from, we have designers, we have engineer detailers, we have salespeople, we have carpenters, we have like event planner, coordinator type people, we have finance, we have an array. And one of our core values at Rockway is that it takes a village. We say it all the time and we talk about it because, like, what you're saying about imposter syndrome for people that are building themselves up in the event space is like those engineers, those technically brilliant people that are, mastering this product and selling it or developing it, they need you and your skill set to get that product in the hands of who it needs to be into and an experience and the method in which it needs to be into them. So like it truly does take a village. And I think it's good that you've identified that, because there are a lot of people that are worried about exactly what you just said when they're fitting in somewhere and they're getting into a company to kind of do their role and accelerate things.
Absolutely.
Garrett, ton of fun talking to you. You know your stuff. I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff all day. Where can people find you? LinkedIn? Are you active anywhere? Anywhere easy for people to kind of check you out?
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Garrett Burnett, Silicon Labs. Happy to connect with everybody.
Awesome, man. Garrett, thanks for doing this today. Thanks for taking time with me. Really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate being here.
I did too, Matt. Thanks for the invite.